Hey everybody, we're looking at Edge Magazine issue 8. This one being released in May 1994 and discussing the future of interactive entertainment. And we see a pretty dinosaur on the cover, which is from the game called Lost Eden, which you probably don't remember. In fact, I don't think any of the covers of Edge Magazine have featured games you remembered, at least up until March 1994. But let's read the subtext. It says 3D Studio once again proves its mettle in Cryo's The Lost Eden for PC, CD-ROM, CDI, and CD32. But instead of rendering machinery, it's breathing life into a magical kingdom with ethereal beauty. Okay, so what's that ethereal beauty? We'll find out inside. There's also talk about Namco on the cover, who was making a major comeback in the mid-90s. So the inside has a bunch of the word Edge. And the opening column talks about a standard format for all different consoles, which was something to think about since they were all turning to CD. Do you have a standard format yet? Nope, but I don't get really why everybody's still buying consoles. Why not just stick to your computer? But yeah, the PC and with Steam selling games, that's pretty close to universal. So let's talk about the CD32 and Namco. But first, the Mars, which would later become the 32X. For Americans mostly, but also Europeans, the Mega Drive was not a huge success in Japan. I don't know if it was released there. A 32-bit machine so that Genesis owners could invest cheaply into the future. But the 32X didn't get that many very good games. It didn't use CD, and it wasn't as strong as the Saturn. So that didn't work out. Daytona USA, all the hype back then, and rightfully so. I still think it's one of the most played games that have been released in the 90s. There's this intro to a game called Mega Race, which I don't remember very well. More talk about arcade games. Namco had the Final Lap series, which looked very good and would pave the way for Ridge Racer, which we see here. Or not. I don't know, but we see what looks like would be Ridge Racer, considering the woman. Another shooting game. And we have Paradius, signaling that Konami is running low on ideas. Super Street Fighter 2 X, as it's called in Japan. In the West, it was called Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. One of the best fighting games of all time, and still played in tournaments. The PSX tools, that was an important part of the PlayStation success. Not only was it fairly easy to program for the PlayStation 1, but Sony sent out all these tools to help you program for the system. So they were shipping it out, people getting ready to make games. And Iron Man, which would have been the 32-bit answer to the PC Engine, well, that was short-lived. It's on to the scrapyard. But the PC Engine, on the other hand, gets extra disks for extra memory. Remember the extra megabyte RAM pack for the Nintendo 64? Well, this was similar. This would give, I don't know, 2 MB, I think, or 8 MB. So that helped. I don't know any games that actually used it, though. The Nintendo 64, as far as I know, only really used 3 games with the extra MB, which would be Perfect Dark, Zelda 6, Ocarina of Time, and Donkey Kong 64. So the 3DO lowered its price, and there's some talk about how it was doing so far, but it was still struggling. And here are a lot of rumors. We see the first image of Miyamoto in Edge magazine holding issue number 4, I think it is, and Total, which was their Nintendo magazine. So here are the letters. More talk about the future, about what kind of system would win. I don't remember exactly what these letters were about, but nothing really interesting. On to the previews. So here we have Road Rash for the 3DO, one of the better games, and it looked quite spiffy, I have to admit, with fully 3D buildings. The cars were sprites, I believe, as were the riders, but it still looked pretty well. And back then, Road Rash was a fairly popular game for the Genesis, so this was an improvement on that. Looking better. Actually using the video of the CDs pretty well. So for the Sega CD you had Formula One World Championship 1993. And by now it's quite forgettable, but I believe at the time it was one of the better racing games. Here you have Inferno, a PC game with fantastic graphics and little else. It got very bad reviews in other magazines. I think Edge actually liked this game. So any game that used full 3D was very interesting to Edge magazine at the time. So they gave this game 4 pages. It was also made in England, so that was easier for Edge to get into. At the time, they weren't as internationally focused. Excuse me. And Ocean, you remember them? They made a lot of subpar games in the 80s and 90s. Like this fighting game for the Jaguar. Here's a platforming game called Ape Shift. It's all forgettable. Poor Ocean. But there was Aliens vs. Predator for the Jaguar, which looked extremely well on pictures. In real play, it looked more like Wolfenstein 3D. Still one of the better games for the Jaguar. It was cool that you had 3 different characters. Unfortunately, all the levels were really bland. But I mean, look at these fantastic still pictures at the time. This looked better than Doom. But it didn't look better than Doom in action, because these are all sprites. So they didn't look very 3D. Okay, so The Lost Eden. An adventure click and carry game with very impressive visuals. I didn't like how the hand-drawn graphics meshed with the 3D created graphics. I didn't think that looked very good, but overall a very pretty game, and the story wasn't that bad. I think it was a bit hyped, how much they put into the story. But it wasn't bad. I think it was worth your time. Yeah. You've tried to create a game with a very strong story so players have a real experience playing it. Well, it's just, you know, all these funny characters like